Effie, and today's video is an in-depth review of V. Schwab's latest book, The Fragile Threads of Power. This video is going to be a little bit different than my previous content, as I wanted to get all of my thoughts in order and create as comprehensive a review as possible, so I'll be using a script. Since this is my first time using a script, I apologise if eye contact is off and if it feels a bit wooden. Sorry. I've made no secret that this book was my most anticipated release of 2023, so I'm excited to be talking about this book. I will say right now that this review will be getting into spoilers. I did think hard about whether I would be talking spoilers today, but there's some pretty significant moments in this book that I feel like my review would be complete if I didn't talk about. So if you're planning on reading this book, and also caveat, I'll be talking about the original trilogy, so if you haven't read them, there will be spoilers for that. And haven't done so yet, I do have a spoiler-free, all vibes, no spoilers video that you can check out in the meantime. Now is the time to add this video to your watch later and come back after you've finished this book. My review will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, hi. You've either read this book and are here to freak out with me, or you aren't planning on reading this book and just want all the tea. Either way, welcome. In short, I adored this book. I'm a massive fan of V. Schwab, to the point that I have a tattoo of her handwriting, so I'm hardly the most unbiased reviewer. That being said, I can completely see why people may not have enjoyed this book. Schwab is somewhat known for the way that she takes her time setting all the pieces on the board in their books, just like a game of Colcott, and this book is certainly no exception. The cast of characters in this book strays into the category of epic fantasy, as we have a really substantial number of old characters as well as quite a few new characters. So it isn't until around the 50% mark that things really start happening in any meaningful way. That is not to say that nothing happens in the first half of this book, but more that it takes its time to set everything up. As someone who loves Schwab's writing and is a massive fan of the world of Shades of Magic, this was a real treat for me to see all of the characters just kind of doing their thing and being able to catch up with the old characters as well as get introduced to the new characters. If you want a fast-paced story, Schwab probably isn't the author for you, and that is completely valid. Another criticism that I could see launch at this book, and I'm going to put a spoiler warning on screen for the Dark Vault, so if you haven't read the Archived and the Unbound, skip to when the spoiler warning is gone, is the fact that some of the imagery in this book is incredibly reminiscent of, as you may have guessed, the Dark Vault. Having read all of Schwab's back catalogue, I actually really love when story elements bleed from one series to another, and I view them as being akin to Easter eggs. However, I can definitely see why a reader may not be a fan of this repetition. The doorways that Tess creates when she repairs and improves the Doormaker reminded me a lot of the doorways that are created in the Unbound as a result of Mackenzie using the crew key. In particular, the way that scars are left in the world where doorways once were. I think this creates some interesting implications for the role we'll see these doorways playing in upcoming books, in particular, the doorway to nowhere that Tess created. These are the two major critiques that I could see people having with this book, although, as I mentioned, neither of these are really negatives to me. As I've already mentioned, Schwab takes her time building out the story so that all of the characters are fully realised and the stakes are well established. Something that I didn't realise until I was reviewing my notes to put this video together is the level to which Schwab's writing is just a masterclass in craft, as there are so many points in the story where the reader is literally given all of the information that they need, but it's something that's presented in a completely innocuous way, or it's the classic situation of the information being given out of order so the reader doesn't realise that all of the pieces have been placed in front of them. A lot of times these clues are in random things that characters muse about, which feel relevant to their own stories, but their musings relate to someone else's journey. Such as at one point, Lila is thinking about the fact that you should never open a door unless you know where it leads, which is exactly what Tess does just a few chapters later. At another point in the story, Rye is being slightly morose and thinking about death and ghosts, and wonders if Holland's ghost is wandering around his own London. That one had me screaming. My favourite of these particular musings comes when Tess is wandering around the markets of London and considering how good markets have two sides to them, and compares them to a game of Sanct, where the high priest is the one card with two sides. Not gonna lie, I just about lost my mind at that one when I realised this was a subtle way that Schwab was telling the reader that Ezreal, the new Avanescen, was duplicitous. Schwab is also very good at leaving much more subtle clues, like the fact that the book opens with a quote from Tyrion Searson, as is traditional for the books, but where he was previously given the title of head priest or Avanescen, this time he was accredited as the 9th Avanescen, which is something that can easily be missed, but basically it's communicating to the reader that Tyrion has a successor and thus has died in the intervening years. I thought the choice to have Tyrion die off page was a masterstroke in pain, because it somewhat robs the reader of their usual opportunity for grieving character deaths and creates a more authentic experience of grief, where they will suddenly be reminded of the loss and feel the pain all over again, similar to the way that the characters within the story are feeling. Overall, I thought the world building was really fantastic in this book. I think the writing is such that it's accessible to readers who are entering the series with this trilogy, but it also brings a lot of value to veteran readers. There were a number of nods to things that readers who are familiar with the original trilogy will recognise, such as mention of when Rye was kidnapped by the Shadows as a child, and Cal not only rescued Rye but assassinated every member of the group. We see the aftermath of this event from Rye's perspective in this book, as he remembers discovering a young Cal soaking in a bathtub covered in blood. There are also callbacks to lighter moments, like Cal and Lila's first interactions, where Cal walked wooden boards to trap Lila in place, but this time the tables are turned and it's Lila trapping Cal, but in a much more consensual situation. There's a moment where the characters are reflecting on the impact of the Black Knight, and those who've read A Conjuring of Light will know the origin of the Silvers and the fact that they are the minority because either the inhabitants of London chose cowardice and let Oseron in, or they burnt up in the battle. Whilst this was knowledge that I already had, I found it interesting to see the scale of just hundreds of Silvers compared to thousands dead and thousands of cowards. It was also a great reminder that good doesn't always triumph and receive their just rewards. Overall, I really appreciated that there's still a lot of world building happening, even after 3 full-length novels, 3 graphic novels, and a multitude of short stories. It's an interesting reminder to the reader that Schwab's only showing us a snapshot of these worlds and a snapshot of time. They have full lives in full worlds outside of what's on the page. Something that really shows the way that Schwab has come into her craft is the effortless way that they balance moments of high emotion with moments of levity. One of the ways that I feel like levity is effectively employed in this book is the rumour mill that surrounds King Rye. The most virulent rumour is that magic is dying in Arns because Rye has no elemental magic. However, there are a number of fun rumours, particularly the way that he treats his queen. My favourite of these rumours is that he cut Nadia's hair so they'd have a matching pair. On a personal note, a geeky part of me loved the linguistic expansion that we got in this book. I felt so happy when I discovered that the term for an heir to the throne is genderless in Arnesian. So whether Rye, Nadia and Luke had had a prince or a princess, their child would still be referred to as Masveris. This is such a small thing, but it made my Emby heart sing. Another linguistic element of this story, which is also intrinsically linked to the fact that there's still a lot we don't really know about how magic works, and that's the way the Antari spells work. In the original trilogy, it seemed to be established that Kel had to be taught the words of the Antari spells, whilst the words just came to Holland. We see this with Kosika, who simply waits for the words to come to her when she has a need. What I found truly fascinating was how close Asazari is to Nasaruk, don't die. As if Makatan is very linguistically close to the language of magic. I don't know if this is something that we'll see explored further as the trilogy progresses, but I feel like we may get more of a look into the history of Black London, as not only has Costco visited it twice, but there have been mentions of Black London artifacts spread throughout Arns. Going into this book, I'd heard Schwab mention several times that this book was not going to just feature cameos from the old cast of characters, but they were intrinsic to the plot, and I'm pleased that when I reviewed my notes, there's an almost perfect 50-50 split between the old characters and the new characters. We're introduced to a lot of new characters, but it somehow doesn't feel overwhelming. The most significant new characters are clearly Tess, Ezreal, Nadia, Ren, and Kosika. I do have some theories about the roles of new characters that may have played a smaller part in this book, but I think we're going to see a lot more of in books 2 and 3, but we'll get to that at the end of this video. I think Tess and Kosika are particularly interesting characters, not only because they're central to this trilogy, but also because they're very similar to Lila, and I could see echoes of who she may have been in another life. There's a symmetry to the fact that Lila's story in A Darker Shade of Magic truly began when she set fire to the boat that she'd been living on, in the same way that Tessa's story truly begins when she's put in a position where she has to destroy her shop. Kosika's similarities to Lila lie in her approach to her power. She seems to approach the world as if there's no limit to her power and will push herself well beyond the natural order, which is definitely something that we've seen Lila do. What intrigues me about Kosika are all the questions that still surround her. For the fact that Kosika is a child queen, she's not really painted as a character who's too volatile. She handles herself with a lot more poise than would be expected of a 14-year-old, and there are glimpses of having that same gravitas at an even younger age. At the same time, there are some cracks in her careful facade where we're reminded that she still is very much a child. Sometimes this is shown in playful moments, like her growing a cherry tree laden with fruit and then making it rain on her friends, and sometimes it's shown in the fact that her fluctuating emotions can cause her powers to also fluctuate. Beyond the fact that Kosika is an Antari, and by the very nature of that, she's one of the most powerful people in any of the 4 Londons, there's a suggestion that she potentially has the power to balance, which is something that's been set up as being beyond the powers of the Antari, and that's revolutionary to the story. I honestly don't know how I feel about Ezreal, because she's so aloof at times, but she's also annoyingly likeable. She's so unlike Tyrion, and I think that's what draws the reader to her, because she isn't trying to be him. She's just authentically herself, or so it seems. Whilst there are clues throughout the book of her involvement with the Hand, the reveal coming so late into the story means that we don't know her motivations, and we certainly don't know what her ominous plans to destroy Rye as part of the Long Night celebrations are. Schwab doesn't generally write characters who are all good or all bad, so I hesitate to say this, but she kind of seems like the perfect villain, because not only does she have unfettered access to Rye, but she's also incredibly powerful, and most importantly, she knows how to kill Rye. This sets a really terrifying precedent, for going into book 2. Connected to Ezreal, we have Nero, who is presumably her brother. I feel like we only get a small peek into his character, but there's definitely a big question mark over his head over whether he's involved with the Hand, as well as what his backstory is. I really hope we get more of him in future books, and I will be talking about him a little later in this video. Nadia is by far the most interesting new character because she's so deeply morally grey. When I saw Schwab speak at Edinburgh Book Festival, she mentioned that they would ask every eARC reader what they thought of a particular character, but didn't say which character. At the time, I didn't have an eARC, so I wasn't able to get confirmation when I spoke to her, but I have strong suspicions that the character that they were talking about was Nadia. Nadia operates within her own code of ethics, which don't necessarily match up to the way that other people will approach the world. And she's just so fun and unpredictable because of it. She excels at the things she cares about, so she's a fantastic mother who approached and continues to approach motherhood with pure intentions, and her skills at invention are unmatched, but she also won't think twice about using a 15-year-old girl as bait, and definitely doesn't see the harm in creating devices that in the wrong hands could destroy a kingdom. Speaking of the Queen, let's get into Rai and Alucard and Ren. I was initially shocked by the fact that Rai was going to have a queen in this book, but I very quickly remembered that I trusted Schwab's writing, so I was looking forward to how the dynamic would be handled, and honestly, it's absolutely perfection. Alucard and Rai are utterly wonderful fathers, and it's clear that their bond has only deepened in the 7 years since we last saw them. The scene on Nadia and Rai's wedding day, when Nadia makes a point of seeking Alucard out and telling him that she understands that she's not just marrying Rai, but the both of them, and she's not looking to provide anything to Rai that Alucard can't give him. Just absolute chef's kiss. It just makes me so warm and fuzzy, seeing how comfortable everyone in their little polycule is with one another, and that Nadia and Alucard are busy mates. It's just the sweetest. Schwab's skill at writing relationships definitely continues through with the depiction of Cal and Lila. There's something so effortless about the way that Schwab has managed to convey the comfort that comes with having been a couple for so long, as well as the way these characters feel as though they've grown and matured, whilst also feeling completely like the characters that you fell in love with in the original trilogy. I particularly love the fact that Cal rose to the challenge of being unable to wield magic and became completely and utterly deadly with a blade, and just an even more worthy partner for someone like Lila. In the same way that I enjoyed the small ways that the world expanded with this book, I loved learning little facts about Cal, like the fact that he'd gone skinny dipping in the Isle when he's a teenager, and that he's a happy drunk. The latter we may have already known, but Cal is just generally such a serious character, so it was a welcome reprieve to see him drunkenly singing a sea shanty. In this book, we really saw that Lila is a great partner for Cal on so many levels. She can understand his pain as both an Antari, and because she's had her eye removed when she was younger, so she can empathise with the loss of a part of herself. She's a masterclass in resilience and adapting to the circumstances that you've been placed in. Without her, Cal never would have thought to channel his efforts into becoming Kay. I loved how proud Lila was when Cal managed to best her in a fight and cause her to lose her blade, as well as appreciating the fact that Lila has the level of respect for Cal not to take away his pain, even though it kills her not to act, because it's not what Cal wants. It was also nice to see Lila have a conversation with Nadia about how she's child-free by choice, and the fact that Nadia respects Lila's choices, even though she herself loves motherhood. Just brilliant. More child-free by choice rap, please. Before I close out this video, I think it's only right to talk about some theories that I have around this series. You may notice that I haven't mentioned Holland yet, and that is because, to be quite frank, I don't know what to make of him. When Schwab mentioned in her last read-along video that we'd be seeing all of the characters who survived at the end of A Conjuring of Light and some who didn't, never in my wildest dreams did I expect that we'd be seeing Holland. I figured maybe they were just alluding to the fact that Holland was venerated as a saint in White London, but no. I am suspicious that he only appears to Koska after she'd travelled to Black London and spilt some of her blood there, as well as the potential implication that when she travelled, some of the pieces of Black London could have got embedded in her. The fact that he appears to Koska as who he was before his power went into the Inheritor, or at least he has his Antari mark again, also makes me suspicious. I am curious if his eyes were ever described as being the opposite way round in this book. I couldn't find any descriptions of which one of his eyes in this book is black. I believe in the original trilogy it's his left eye. But if Holland isn't actually Holland, I feel like we can almost guarantee that a clue has been left, and I feel like his eyes would be a cool, subtle nod. On one hand, I do hope that Holland is actually Holland, and his desire to see his world healed has stretched beyond his death. Although I do find it sad that he's not found the peace, because he was so ready for death. On the other hand, I'm just so suspicious, and I think Holland could be an Oshock. Related to White London, I think there's an interesting dynamic that has been set up between Nasi, Lark and Koska, because Koska's described as loving her friends and wanting to bind them to her, which sounds like a very dangerous and unhealthy level of affection, which I could see Koska lashing out if she feels that she's been slighted by them. Around Tess, I have some strange and weird theories. I wondered if by the end of the series she would lose her eyes. I guess I know how Schwab likes to hurt readers, and that seemed like a particularly painful thing to have happen to her character. I also think it's fairly clear, although it could be a misdirect, that Tess's sisters are going to play a large part in the rest of the series, especially her sister with the ability to hunt rare items. Something I don't have any specific theories around because I don't think we have all of the pieces yet, but Lila never ended up having to use the piece of magic Maris gave her to help her see events that she'd missed unfold. I think this is going to have a really important part to play in future books, and I think it's going to be a really satisfying callback. I've been contemplating who I think the leader of the Hand could be, and I've 3 candidates: Nero, Connor, the youngest Vescan prince, or the Vescan crown prince. I suspect that Schwab has given us all of the pieces we need to uncover his identity in this book, but nothing enough to 100% confirm it. The clues that I could identify are that he speaks Vescan, but it's described as being stiff, as though it's not his mother tongue, which would point away from Connor or his older brother. That he gives the impression of being Ostra or even Vestra, which honestly describes all 3 characters, and his hair is at one point described as being dark, pointing toward Nero, or burnished, pointing more towards a Vescan. Further clues that it could be a Vescan are that, and I quote, "The Crown Prince has not been seen at court in weeks. Some think he is at sea, others that he is docked somewhere in Arns and travels southward in disguise to save his youngest brother, Connor." Additionally, Alucard and Lila have a conversation around the Hand, and it's put forward that the best way for a foreign power to win a battle is to get others to fight their battle for them. Connor and Nero, theoretically, are positioned in such a way that Ezreal could easily be able to work with them. Perhaps Ezreal truly is the leader of the Hand, and it's all a double bluff. I think there's also an outside chance that the leader of the hand could be some combination of all three men, and that's why it's difficult to know who it is. Ultimately, I think the hand is a bit of a misdirection, because the idea that history doesn't repeat but it often rhymes comes to mind with these books. I could see within the Threads of Power trilogy similar story beats where Black London / Holland is a threat to other worlds, as we saw in the original trilogy. The way they will rhyme as opposed to repeating is that at the end of the Fragile Threads of Power, the impression is given that Cosca only seeks to rekindle the fires of Black London so that she can strengthen her own world. So it'll be interesting to see how that bleeds into Arns and beyond. Hi, just popping in because despite writing a script so I could get all my thoughts in order and include everything, I completely forgot one extra theory that I have, and that's around Ren's magic. I think Ren's going to have unusual magic because we've seen hints of it in the way that animals flock to her. I mean, obviously she's just very charismatic, very much like Rai, but I think that could relate. I also think there's a possibility that when Tess talks about being able to see Ren having magic around her, but not being able to see the colour of the threads, I think there's an outside possibility that the colour's actually silver, and that's why they appear so pale. But, I mean, I presume we're going to get an answer to it at some point in the series, but Ren is still very young to have her magic come in, so I guess we'll see in the next two books, maybe. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much from the very bottom of my heart. It truly means the absolute world to me. Please comment down below your thoughts and feelings on this book, and I would love to hear all of your theories. I'm going to end the video with some of my favourite quotes, so until next time, love you!